On today's show, we have a lot of ground to cover. We'll talk about Joe Pavelski inking his contract extension. We'll talk about Saturday's game against the New York Rangers and what went wrong there. And then close out the show with a little bit of Stars roster news, as well as an outlook on the Western Conference playoff standings. All of this coming up on a Monday edition of Locked On Stars.
Your Locked On Stars, your daily podcast on the Dallas Stars. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Howdy, Stars fans. Welcome back to the Locked On Stars podcast, the only daily podcast covering the Dallas Stars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. I'm your host, Dane Lewis, your local expert on all things Dallas Stars hockey, credentialed member of the Dallas Stars media, coming to you on this Monday, March 14th. And today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline.net, where the game starts. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for stopping by today's episode of Locked On Stars, for making us your first listen of the day. Be sure to subscribe to and follow our show wherever you get your podcast at, whether that's on YouTube or your favorite podcasting platform. Sure do appreciate all the follows, subscriptions, likes, comments, you name it. Thank you guys so much for your continued support of me and the show Locked On Stars. This show is not possible without you guys listening and tuning in every single day. But without any further hesitation, let's get right into it. Talking about some good positive news that broke Friday. I know I made a brief video about it that went up on YouTube and Twitter, a quick reaction video, but would like to talk about it a little bit more in depth here. And that is Captain America, Joe Pavelski, is staying in Dallas for at least one more season as a member of the Stars organization. On Friday, it was announced that Joe Pavelski, the 37-year-old forward, has signed a one-year contract extension worth $5.5 million with an additional $500,000 in performance-based incentives. Don't quite know what all that entails yet. I'm sure we won't know maybe until the offseason or before the start of the next NHL regular season in 2022-2023. But number 16 will be staying with the gang in green for at least the next season. And this is really good news, if you ask me. I know I said this on Friday as well. This just gives, him, the Stars organization, Stars fans, peace of mind going into the trade deadline and eventually the offseason. I think that there's kind of this general consensus that Joe Pavelski is very well liked here in Dallas as a member of this team. And now we know he's not going anywhere between now and the end of the 2022-2023 season. And realistically, Joe Pavelski can have his best statistical year in this 21-22 season. Right now, through 57 games, he has 23 goals, 37 assists, 60 points in total. His best season statistically came back in 2013-2014 when he was a member of the San Jose Sharks. He had 41 goals, 38 assists, 79 points in total. So he's on pace to shatter that assist number from the 2013-2014 season. The goals, maybe not so much. He has a lot of work to do in that category. Don't know if he'll quite get there. Certainly can still rack up plenty of assists. Still has a good amount of time, 82 games on the season, only 57 into this season so far. He's played in every single game, which is impressive in its own right at his age. I mean, no one would bat an eye or question him if he wanted to take a night off or take a few games off. Just the age he's at, his body probably has a lot of wear and tear on it, but yet he's been in every game so far. And knock on wood, hopefully we will continue to see that be a trend throughout this season and postseason if the Stars make it that far. Very realistically, though, I think Joe Pavelski can get 19 more points at least this season if he continues to do what he has done this season with Jason Robertson and Roope Hintz. And he's really just done just about everything you could ask for as a free agent acquisition that was acquired back in the 1920 offseason after that disappointing playoff exit at the hands of the St. Louis Blues. The Stars went out and got Pavelski. And ever since that moment in time, he leads the Stars in points, goals, power play goals, 29 on that number. Since joining the team in 2019-2020, he has 61 goals, 80 assists, 141 points. I think leads in all those categories except assists. Really, and there's even more numbers that I didn't dive into. I think he was third on the team in points during the 2020 Stanley Cup playoff run. Just everything and more that you could want from this guy that was picked up as a free agent. And really, regardless of what happens this season or even next season, I mean, this has to go down as one of the better offseason acquisitions in the NHL in recent memory, because this guy has just been a production factory. He's been so efficient. He's been so consistent. He's uplifted this locker room. He has not been a problem at all. He's not been problematic in any sense of the imagination. Been a good locker room guy. His family seems to really enjoy Dallas. That's a point that he made very clear whenever he inked this new deal, that his wife and his son, Nate, really do enjoy being in Dallas. Seems they enjoy being associated with the Dallas Stars organization. He commented that he likes the guys in the locker room. He seems to get along pretty well with everyone. Everyone seems to respect him, as he has the alternate Captain A on his jersey. I think that means a lot, given the brevity of time that he's been with the Dallas Stars, to be respected by so many of these men in the locker room, just knowing the kind of guy that he is, the ultimate team player, the ultimate teammate, the ultimate pro, as we've heard Rick Bowness call him several times throughout this season. And I know I retweeted it on the Locked On Stars account. I know that Razor was at morning skate on Saturday. Only guy out on the ice for morning skate. First guy out on the ice for morning skate in front of the net, working on his game. Of course, Joe Pavelski. We've seen it all season. I think we're going to continue to see it. This contract, definitely not a big blockbuster deal, but still the money, this $5.5 million, not going to change who Joe Pavelski is. And that's a hard worker, a guy who wants to continue to get better day in and day out. So that way his team can get better day in and day out. This guy's a great leader. He's going to be such an asset down the stretch for this Stars team. And if they can get into the postseason, who knows what he can do, because the postseason is a different animal. But a veteran like Pavelski, on the outside looking in, a guy like him is meant to thrive in the Stanley Cup playoffs, especially with his line mates. I mean, who knows what that top line can be capable of if the Stars team reaches the postseason. They have to get there first, and there's still a lot of work to be done in that regard. But I'm very excited about this deal. Let me know in the comments down below if you're watching on YouTube, or reach out to me on Twitter at Dane_Lewis. What you think of the Joe Pavelski extension. Maybe there's something I'm not taking into account that you think could be problematic for the Stars. I don't think they're paying him too much money. Maybe would have liked to see it be a little bit cheaper, but all in all, I think this is a good deal. If we can get even half this production from Pavelski next season, I think that this is a great signing, but I don't even think he's going to be that bad, that much of a drop off from Pavelski. I think that he's really showing no sign of slowing down. If he takes care of himself in the offseason, I don't see why there's any reason that he can't come out and put up similar numbers to what he's doing this year for what could potentially be his last NHL contract. Well, coming up next, we will continue to talk about news from the weekend. We will talk about Saturday's game between the Stars and the New York Rangers. Certainly a lot to break down there, and it's coming up after a quick break after we hear from some of our sponsors. Today's episode of Locked On Stars is brought to you by Athletic Greens and their new product, AG1. Guys, Athletic Greens sent me some of this product, AG1, and I got to tell you, it's the real deal. It has pretty good taste in comparison to other powdered mixed drinks. It really gets you going in the morning. You drink it on an empty stomach, and it really helps get you through your day. But then it even works past that and helps you sleep at night. I've noticed the times that I've taken it that my sleep has been better that night, and my energy has been more consistent throughout the day, and I overall feel better. So what's in this stuff? What's in AG1? With one delicious scoop of Athletic Greens, you're absorbing 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens to help you start your day off right. This special blend of ingredients supports your gut health, your nervous system, your immune system, your energy, recovery, focus, and aging. Athletic Greens was created when the founder experienced a ton of gut health issues and ended up on a complicated supplement routine to recover. It cost him $100 a day. He created Athletic Greens after experiencing how difficult it was to create an optimal nutrition routine on your own. Right now, it's time to reclaim your health and arm your immune system with the convenient daily nutrition that it needs, especially heading into the flu and cold seasons. It's just one scoop in a cup of water every day. That's it. No need for a million different pills and supplements to look out for your health. To make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/NHL Network. Again, that's athleticgreens.com/NHL Network to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. Jumping back into today's episode of Locked On Stars, your first listen of the day. Your host, Dane Lewis, here at Dane_Lewis on Twitter. You can also find our show on Twitter at Locked On Stars. Be sure to give us a follow there as well. Nearing 700 followers over there, so be sure to go hop on the bandwagon now before it's too late. Continuing on with today's show, though, we have to talk about Saturday's game between the Stars and the Rangers that went down at the AAC. Only the second of what will be 4 home games for the Stars in the month of March. And that's going to, I think, play a factor for the rest of this month. And we'll talk about that a little bit at the end of this segment. But going into this game, if you had told me Saturday morning when I woke up that the Dallas Stars would put up 4 goals on Igor Shesterkin, I would have lost my mind. I would have been ecstatic. I would have, I had a pretty good Saturday anyway. I'll say that. It was a pretty good day, but I think it would have been raised even more up until obviously I saw the Stars game unfold and saw what happened. And even in the early goings of that game, I was honestly pretty pleased with what I saw. They scored, 49 seconds into the game, Esa Lindell on a weird backhand goal that really I don't think anyone was expecting that shot to go in, but sure enough, it did. Then we see Yoel Kiviranta send a puck on the net. Tyler Seguin gets a good piece of it, deflects in. The Stars have a 2-0 lead on the best goalie in the National Hockey League. All you have to do is play solid defense, rely on Jake Ottinger. Easy peasy. You ride that to the finish line. If only it were that simple. The Stars started so strong, but really just fell apart, gave the Rangers way too many opportunities. We talked about on Friday that this Rangers team is similar to the Stars and that they can struggle in their 5-on-5 game. But that's really, if they play a stout defense, which the Stars at times this season have been a stout defense and historically over the past few seasons have been, a defensive-minded team. That's kind of what they've been known for, is the grit and grind aspect of the game. And the Stars just really weren't doing that well, and the Rangers made them pay because they do have those weapons that can burn you, whether it's Mika Zibanejad, Chris Kreider, you name it, Adam Fox, on the blue line. This team is stacked with talent. There's a reason why they're in the top 3 in the Metro and vying for a high playoff spot and looking to make a deep playoff run. I feel like there's so many other talented teams out east, whether it's Florida, Carolina, even Tampa Bay, that maybe this Rangers team gets overshadowed a little bit. I don't think they're the best team in the Eastern Conference, but they certainly shouldn't be counted out as a team that can make it at least to the Eastern Conference Finals. And the Stars really just failed to, I feel like, acknowledge that after they got out to their 2-0 lead. And if there's anything we've learned this season, Jake Ottinger has had a fantastic sophomore campaign, but it's really just not good for him to get bombarded the way he did. The Stars got that 2-0 lead, and I feel like they started to play a little too conservative defensively, which we've seen from them this season, but you can't do that with Jake Ottinger, and you can't do that with the weapons like New York has. Chris Kreider has been in the race for most goals scored by a player this season, and then you throw in all their other weapons on the offensive side of the ice as well. And any goalie is going to struggle with that. You put Shesterkin up against that night in and night out, he's going to certainly struggle. And this was a tough outing for Jake Ottinger. Some of the goals that were scored on him were pretty much unguardable, things that were hard for him to see, hard for him to play, but also his defense not doing him too many favors, putting him in some vulnerable positions, whether it's putting him on the man disadvantage on the penalty kill, or just in general, the way they were spread out on the ice in the 5-on-5 game. And the game, it's just such a shame because this game started with so much promise. A win here helps keep the Stars in a playoff position without having to worry about the outcomes of other games. But they just, even though there were some good moments throughout the games, there were some moments even after they were down by 2 goals that it seems like they might fight back and we might have a chance to see them pull off a great comeback to stay in that playoff spot. But the Stars just could not get out of their own way. They let things snowball after things got a little bit difficult after they gave up that first goal to make the game 2-1. And things really just took a turn for the worse from there. And we saw this in Nashville too. I mean, that Nashville game was a lot lower scoring, but I feel like it's a similar thing. One bad thing happened, and the Stars kind of let it snowball to eventually where things got out of hand. They end up losing the game, and they get no points at all. Obviously, down the stretch in this New York game, didn't seem like maybe the Stars had a chance at a point, but at least in Nashville, I mean, they blow the 1-0 lead that they have. They have the tie, and you think, okay, maybe they can force OT, at least get a point out of this. All is not lost, but all was lost in that Nashville game because they let things snowball, they let things get out of hand, and they let the Preds take the lead with just over a minute left. The Stars could not rally in time. In this game, they have a 2-goal lead, which isn't very common for the Stars this season. And they were, playing with a hot goalie in Jake Ottinger. They seem to have cracked the armor in Igor Shesterkin having a weird random off night. And that's just one of those games that you have to find a way to win. If you can get who will be the Vezina Trophy winner to have a night like that, I mean, you have to capitalize on that, and you have to get 2 points, especially at home. And we just did not see the Stars do this. And I mean, this team is different without Miro Heiskanen, even though we did see other defensemen step up. We saw Esa Lindell get 2 points on the night. John Klingberg got 2 assists on the night. But it's got to be a joint effort from the defensemen to step up. And I know there's a lot of shorthandedness there. Thomas Harley's only a rookie. Yanni Hakanpää still kind of getting acclimated to the league. There's a lot to be said about the defenseman core for the Stars team, but really we just need to see more. And I know it's hard to ask those guys that aren't Esa or John, but man, this team dearly misses Miro Heiskanen. We need him back as soon as possible. We did see Jason Robertson score a power play goal. We saw Joe Pavelski score a goal that took the game from 5-3 to 5-4. That was one of those moments where we thought maybe the Stars can get back into this. Maybe the Stars can force the tie, go to OT, and maybe at least get a point out of this. But yeah, it just was not meant to be. Not the Stars' night, even though it seemed like it was early on. It seemed like to almost be like that game against Boston that they played on that one Sunday night right before the Super Bowl, where they won 6-1, and then it just absolutely dominated from the get-go. It seemed like we might be in store for one of those kind of games. Just not meant to be. The Stars are now hitting the road for a 4-game road trip starting on Tuesday in Toronto. But I'm oddly optimistic going into this road trip. And now that I say that, watch this be a disaster, because these other big road trips, I've been pessimistic and things have actually turned out okay. So watch me just absolutely curse the Stars team. Certainly hope not. But I mean, this team has had to play a lot on the road in March. So far up to this point, they still have a lot of road games left this month. I feel like and even before the month of March, I mean, they had some road stretches. I feel like this team is starting to get comfortable on the road. I feel like that's what they're used to right now. And it sounds weird. I know that, the home ice advantage, you want to play at home, you want to play well at home. But I think the Stars team is they've gotten acclimated to the life on the road so far at this point in the season, that I think it's good for them. It's almost, you whenever you play at home, you have your routine. You show up for morning skate at a certain time, you do your thing, you have your routine set, but then you kind of have your own routine for the road as well. And I feel like the Stars have gotten in that groove over the past few weeks playing on the road so often. They can now, it sounds weird, but get back in that groove going on the road for 4 games out east. I think it could be good for them. I'm optimistic. They're playing some good teams, but also playing some teams that they definitely should beat, like Montreal and the New York Islanders. Going to be very interesting to see how it shapes out. I'm optimistic going into this road trip. I think the Stars have an opportunity to really build themselves up and obviously put themselves back in a playoff position in what is becoming a more and more crowded Western Conference, which we'll talk about in just a second after another quick break and after we hear from some of our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline.net. It's that time of year again, as college basketball's tournament is finally upon us. From all the latest odds, contests, and player props, BetOnline.net is the #1 source for all your sports betting needs and info. BetOnline remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering, information needs, including live betting and your favorite Vegas casino games. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. BetOnline.net, where the game starts. Today's episode is also brought to you by Built Bar. All Built Bars are covered in 100% real chocolate. They're low-calorie, high-protein. Replace your candy bars with Built Bars. They are better for you. A typical candy bar can be anywhere from 200 to 300 calories. Compare that to a Built Bar, which has less calories at 130, 4 grams of sugar, only 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. Mint brownie, coconut almond, and a new flavor for this month, white chocolate cookies and cream. They are all delicious, and new flavors are coming out all the time. If you think a flavor might be good, they'll make it, and it will be delicious and good for you. Because at Built Bar, they're all about the taste. They make it taste delicious first, then they figure out how to make it healthy. And I don't know how, but they pull it off every single time. Go to Built.com right now and use promo code LOCKED15 to get 15% off your order. Again, use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off your order at Built.com. And closing out today's episode of Locked on Stars, your first listen of the day. Your host, Dane Lewis here to give you a little bit of roundup news, if you will, about the Stars lineup, as well as give you a quick overlook of the Western Conference playoff picture as it stands right now, because I feel like every Monday when we talk about it, things shuffle as far as who the Stars are in contention with. But before we talk about that, the Stars have made a small minor roster adjustment. We did see AHL goalie Adam Shield get called up on Saturday to back up Jake Ottinger. He has now been sent back down to the AHL. Braden Holtby supposedly dealing with a minor lower body injury. Seems like hopefully he'll be back to normal soon, but I imagine the Stars will be riding Jake Ottinger pretty hard over the next stretch of several games, which is fine by me. I think that New York game was a weird oddity. I don't think that will throw off his game too much. If anything, he will respond to that adversity. We saw the way he responded after getting bombarded in Florida against the Panthers. I'm optimistic, happy for Jake. Think he's going to crush this opportunity that he has to continue to be the number one guy for the Stars. In other roster news, the Dallas Stars have recalled forward Marian Studenic, who they got a few weeks back off waivers from the New Jersey Devils. He was on a conditioning assignment in the AHL with the Texas Stars down in Cedar Park. And in 4 games with the Texas Stars, he had 2 goals, 4 assists, totaling 6 points. So pretty good outing in 4 games for him. Obviously, the AHL is very different than the NHL, but maybe we'll be seeing Studenic on the NHL roster. Maybe he'll finally get some playing time with the NHL roster. And I'm curious to see how he integrates himself with the bottom 6 and who he'll be sharing minutes with, who he will build chemistry with, and who he could potentially, spark himself up with and maybe produce at a somewhat high level as far as bottom 6 forwards go. So be on the lookout for Marian Studenic in the lineup sometime, potentially on this upcoming road trip for the Dallas Stars. Now, looking at the Western Conference playoff picture, things are starting to, I'm not even starting, they've been crazy. Things are continuing to stay absolutely chaotic. The Vegas Golden Knights are now out of the top 3 in the Pacific and find themselves in the second wildcard spot behind the Nashville Predators. The Dallas Stars are the next team in line for that wildcard spot, only 1 point behind with 67. The Vegas Golden Knights have 68. The Vancouver Canucks have 65 points at the time of recording this. At the time of recording, the Canucks are down 2-0 to the Tampa Bay Lightning in the third period. If that score holds, they are not tied. I have not checked. Hopefully, by the time you're hearing this, the Canucks have lost. But even without the Canucks, we have some other teams to worry about. The Winnipeg Jets and Anaheim Ducks both sitting at 64 points. Certainly not out of reach of catching the Stars in the near future. There's still lots of work to do for the Stars and other teams across the NHL. Still lots of season left, but it just makes some of these other losses that the Stars have taken, especially some recent losses, just feel so much worse, whether it's the Rangers loss, the Nashville loss. I mean, you could even go back all the way to October. The Vegas Golden Knights lost the first one and the second one, both games that the Stars could have won. You look back to that St. Louis game earlier in the year, that last one with the no calls with Miro Heiskanen and the Blues winning that game in regulation because the NHL officiating was an absolute joke in that game. So many instances of games where the Stars probably should have come out on top or at least gotten a point, and now it's starting to hurt them a little bit. A lot of these teams are a little too close for comfort, and we've seen the Stars come up big in some of these games to stay in the race or even stay in playoff positioning. But now it seems like they're maybe losing their footing a little bit. The Pacific Division, always shifting who's in and who's out. Certainly going to be an interesting storyline to watch as the rest of the season unfolds. But that's going to do it for today's episode. Thank you again for making the Locked On Stars your first listen of the day. Now go make your second listen of the day, the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. Hosts Steele Roden and Flip Livingstone help you become the expert of your fantasy league. It's free and available wherever you get your podcast at, just like our show here. Locked On Stars. Be sure to hit that subscribe and or follow button depending on where you're listening, and follow our show. We are free and available no matter where you listen or how you listen. Be sure to tune in tomorrow as we'll be giving you a preview for the game between the Stars and Maple Leafs going down in Toronto. Been a hot minute since the Stars have played in Toronto, Ontario. Going to be a fun matchup to talk about. Austin Matthews, always a handful to deal with. We'll talk about how the Stars can approach taking on him as well as the rest of this talented Maple Leafs squad. That's coming up on tomorrow's episode. We'll see you there, Stars fans. Have a great Monday.